Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and with me is my esteemed colleague, as always, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing good, Dave. Sounds
Good.
like you've already had a bunch of coffee, so to get
I
us
switched I
started.
switched to water a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Maybe you need coffee.
Maybe I need
Okay.
coffee. That's a fine line.
All right. Okay.
Well, we'd like to welcome all of our viewers and listeners back to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. Today's topic, well, I guess we're just going to jump into it. Today's topic is, are you doing too much? And when we think about that, are you doing too much? What does that mean? What does that look like? How do you feel about that when you think about that, when you have those, when you contemplate, am I doing too much or not enough? So, wow, this is a really rough intro. I
That's
guess we can't
okay.
be perfect all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So, Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on the question of, are you doing too much?
That's a very good question. I mean, and you alluded to the opposite of that, which we hear probably more often, and that is, are you doing enough?
Hmm.
And so when you think about, in contrast, are you doing too much? A lot of times I don't know that people think about that.
Yeah.
For instance, and we touched on this right before we got on the air, but the idea that, me and you have both been in the military, oftentimes it's suggested that we go above and beyond. And so you kind of get in that mindset of always doing probably above and beyond what's actually needed. So that is a very good question. And like you said, I don't know that we all experience that, or we come to that point where we're like, are you doing too much? You're always thinking, am I doing enough? But I don't think that people often think of, are you doing too much? But in recent years, since I retired, I did understand that I was doing way more than was needed. And for me, that had me take a step back, to look at everything that I was doing. And I definitely realized that I was doing way too much. So I had to take some things off of my plate. And for a long period of time, just because I had to regroup to figure out what it really looks like, to maybe be normal and do things at a normal pace, at a normal rate. And so that's what I had to do, because I did not realize until I retired from the military, I started to evaluate everything I was doing, that I was doing probably way too much. So
Hmm.
I did have that moment where I thought about, okay, what are you actually doing? And it did come in my experience. It was that I was doing way more than I should be at that time. So that's what
Hmm.
I think of, when I think of, are you doing too much? It's a direct contrast to, am I doing enough? I don't ever think that I'm at a point where I'm saying I'm not doing enough. I know I'm always above board or above the minimum requirement. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Yeah, and like you, the military analogy resonates with me. In my career field as military police, we were expected to go above and beyond all the time. We
Right.
were we were groomed and taught that, we have to be the example. We can't if we make mistakes, it's gonna be even more profound than if another person makes a mistake in a different career field. So I've always taken that with me, and I learned how to become an overachiever, a high performer, and I've gotten recognitions in the military that support that, and it became just part of who I was. Am I
Right.
always doing the best? Am I always going above and beyond? If I'm not, I need to be. So I got used to just that was the way I operated. Always,
Right.
like you. I mean, who works full time and goes to school full time and has a family full time,
Right. Right.
especially getting your doctorate, because
Yeah.
that's like having not one extra job or a part-time job. That's like having three full-time jobs,
Right.
when
Yeah.
we're going through our programs. And so, are you doing too much? When I think about that, I start thinking about, okay, so outside of the military, with the organizations I've worked with, was I doing too much for them? Because, we have exceeded expectations, and our resumes speak volumes to that. And am I doing too much for the organization or for the team? And how is that being perceived and received?
Right.
Because I was actually asked one time, if you had been putting all that extra effort into that aspect of the company and put that more into your job, you could have been doing better. And I was already doing better than my peers on my team.
Right.
And there wasn't more I could do. So I used that extra energy to support the organization in a different way. And it was not received well. Is like, well, if you're going to spend an extra 20 hours a week on that, I want you an extra 20 hours in the office. And it's like,
Right.
but the company supports those activities, those employee groups to support the employees that work there. And so I had to ask myself, am I doing too much?
Right.
You know, do I need to back off? And on teams that I've been on, was I doing too much? Was I running too hard, too fast for the people around me? And it's not I'm not trying to, be big-headed about this, but there are people out there like us that have that drive to be overachievers and high performers. And the result is you're not recognized or rewarded or even acknowledged for that extra effort. And you see someone else get rewarded for just doing the status quo. So when we say, are you doing too much? That's what I think about. If you're doing too much and it's not being appreciated or accepted or, recognized, and and the organization is actually supporting and providing positive feedback for people just doing the status quo, are you
Right.
really in the right place? And that's what this comes down to me when I think about, are you doing too much? Are you doing too much and not being accepted for it? Because if you're not, then maybe you're not in the right organization or the right team or the right position. And it's time for you to really, like we say so many times, self-reflect and figure out how to change your direction to where you will be appreciated, and that extra effort will be, you know, utilized to your advantage too.
Right. Right.
Are you being taken advantage of really by doing too much? So I'm gonna pause.
Yeah, and you brought up some very key points. I think one is, and you said it early on, was the perception, or people's perception of, are you doing too much? Because you're right. You could be going all out, all in, above and beyond, staying over hours, at your organization, and then your peer is doing the opposite of that. They're
Mhm.
staying, their standard time. They don't work overtime. They go home, and so, but the expectation is that you continue those things.
Right.
But like you say, not get rewarded. It's an expectation for you,
Mhm.
and so I even had a boss years ago did select me for a position, the next level position. And then, during our conversation of why I didn't get the position, he also included the fact that I was supposed to help this individual that they selected. And I was thinking to myself, well,
You
this
promoted
person,
someone
right?
and
You
you want
promoted
me to get them
somebody,
up to speed when
but
I'm
you
already there.
exactly. And so you're right. Sometimes the perception of others and how you should be performing versus how other people should be performing is totally different. So
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So with uh, without a hesitation, that was his response was, I'm going to need you to assist this
Mhm.
individual.
Mhm.
And my response was, well, you selected this person for a reason. They're supposed to
They
be
should be able to
above
do it.
me, have the skills needed. So why would I need to assist them?
Uh-huh.
So that to me, again, kind of to your point, you're doing all these things, but is it being appreciated? Is it, are you needed there? And that's what ultimately happened for me, realizing that I had to move on.
Mhm.
So that's, felt like I was doing everything I needed to, going above and beyond, and not getting the recognition. Not that you're doing it for that, but there was no acknowledgement. There was
Mhm.
no, good job, or just even thanks or anything. It was
Mhm.
just that was the expectation. And if you didn't do up to that standard all the time, there was a question. But
Right.
like you say, with that peer next to you, that's doing nowhere near what you're doing, and it's okay. or that's what we see. Maybe that person is being, counseled every day in the office that you don't see. But our perception of it is that I'm expected to do all these things at this level, and this person, your peer, is not expected to do the same thing. So
Mhm.
um, that definitely causes for reevaluating. Am I in the right place? Should I continue to do these types of things? What is the end game? Am I trying to go somewhere? Am I even going to be able to make it if I continue down this path? So a lot comes into play when you think, okay, am I doing too much? Should I be doing more? Should I be doing less? And in my case, I had to kind of flip the switch, turn the dimmer on,
Mhm.
so that I wasn't doing way above and beyond, but not just sitting back and saying, okay, I'm going to let this coast, but not giving that 110% effort that you were in the past, but just
Mhm.
recognizing it doesn't matter what I do, I'm going to receive the same.
Mhm.
But again, not just sitting back and saying, okay, I'm going to do like everybody else, but just recognizing that all those things you're doing above and beyond are your own doing, your own choice, because there's nothing going to come of it as far as
Mhm.
any type of rewards or any type of acknowledgement. So if you continue
Mhm.
to do it, then it's going to be on you
Yeah,
to
it's like you're
continue
just
that effort.
volunteering all that extra effort.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's again what happened to me was that's where I was. Just everything was just full speed, and but the downside to that too is, and you touched on it too, is your peers may not be ready for it.
Mhm.
I actually, years ago, I think about it, I was doing some work and I had a older lady say, pull me aside and say, hey, why are you always working? Why are you always doing this? Why are you always doing that? And I said, I just can't sit still. I just can't, I know things need to be done. I'm going to continue doing it. And she basically said, well, you're making us look bad. I thought to myself, that's not on me.
Not my problem.
That's on you. If you want to,
Yeah,
stay down to that level or whatever, that's on you.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just doing what I feel I need to do. But I thought that was interesting that I
yeah.
was making them look bad
Mhm.
because I was working. So again, that perception of me thinking I'm doing what I'm supposed to, and then other people viewing it as, either I'm being arrogant, being cocky, or trying to show off, or whatever they thought it
Mhm.
was. And that wasn't the case. I just could not sit still
Yeah,
because that just wasn't me. So again, oftentimes
yeah,
I have been probably doing way too much compared to other people.
right.
But you mentioned it early too about very small percentage of people operate that way. A
Yeah.
lot of times they're okay with status quo or just doing a little bit above the minimum requirement, but that's just never been me. It's
Mhm.
always, you get a task, you get a responsibility, you go to the highest level that you're capable of.
Mhm.
And sometimes it is going to be above your peers or people that you're working with. And in other cases, you may think you're at that high level and you're not
And you're
necessarily at
not,
that level.
yeah, yeah.
So that's the other, up downside, or however you want to view it. That could be the case. You may think you're giving 100%, and other people may feel the same way. In whatever they're doing, they may feel like, hey, I'm doing above and beyond. It's just somebody else is doing more than me.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, a couple of things that you mentioned that I really like, the dialing it down or dialing it back,
yeah,
the dimmer piece, because it can, if you're really if you're charging like that and you're running full speed and you're sprinting like we often do, you
right.
know, you can be taken advantage of because
Yep.
people start realizing how much you can do and how much you are capable of. And now you're not just good at this one little tiny thing, whatever that is that you've been hired to do, you're capable of so much more. And then they're like,
Right.
I need help with this project. I need help with that project. And all of a sudden, your boss is out there drinking coffee with all of their friends while you're doing all of their work, and it's
Right.
like, it's like, so, that's another downside to, are you doing too much? You have to pay attention that if you're doing all this additional work and you're charging that hard that fast, just take a pause for a moment and look around and see what everyone else is doing. Because if you see other people start doing less, then that means you're starting
Right.
to do their work and
Right.
they're able to take it easy. And they're like, well, Dave likes to do that. He likes to do all that stuff. Let him do it. I'm just going to kick back and
Yep.
surf the internet for a couple hours a day. And it's like, well, now it's to your detriment because
Right.
you're not
Yep.
going to get anything out of it. They're getting a benefit, and you're at that point you're being taken advantage of. So
Yep.
you have to be observant when you're pressing that hard. If that's your norm, if that's your normal pace, you have to be aware of your surroundings to make sure that you're not absorbing other people's work, and so they can kick back, and you do have to dial it down sometimes. And
Right.
I've realized it a couple times in my career that I've actually worked myself out of a position because I wind up doing so much, so well, so quickly and efficiently in helping others that I'm no longer needed for that help, that
Right.
they're able to
Yep.
sustain it without me. So it's happened a couple of times. It's not a good feeling.
Right.
It's
Yep.
uncomfortable. I mean, it's kind of cool to be able to say, wow, I fixed this, but I fix it to the point where I no longer have a job.
Exactly.
So, again, you have to ask yourself, are you doing too much? I've also had, supervisors and bosses say, hey, pump the brakes. They can't keep up with you, you know,
Right.
and then that's a reality check right there when you're like, you want me to slow down? You want me to get my stuff done and then wait 3 weeks? What's
Right.
the
Yep.
perception of that? Are people going to look at me and say, well, he's not doing anything anymore. He did one thing, but now for 2 weeks, he's not doing anything. Why is he slacking off?
Yep.
So you really have to be aware of your surroundings if you feel like you're doing too much, or if you're not sure if you're doing too much. Again, that self-evaluation on, what am I really doing here? Who's it really benefiting? To your point, who's this really benefiting? Because if you're not, you're just volunteering at that point.
Right. Well, I mean, you brought again another good point. The idea that you might work yourself out of a job, get too fast, and so that also can lead to, okay, well, like you said in your scenario, you get your job done sooner, and you got 2 weeks. So,
Mhm.
so a lot of times you'll try and find something else to do, and
Right,
that's when
right.
you're starting to do that more than you should, because now you're maybe tapping into lanes that are not yours,
Mhm.
but you see where you can provide some assistance, and then you immediately offer up your services and your skills and abilities to assist them with that, and then that turns into that, okay, wait a minute, this is not even my lane anymore,
Mhm.
but I'm assisting with this. And like you said,
And
as
yeah.
the more you make people comfortable with, okay, he's got this, you know what,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go take a quick break, and
Mhm.
then one break turns into two breaks, and then now you're doing it by yourself. So
Yeah. And then it
you
becomes an expectation almost.
exactly that's when it turns into that expectation. Well, you've been doing this, well,
Yeah.
why
What'd you
wouldn't you
slow down
continue?
for? You're not doing your
Exactly.
job anymore.
Right. So yeah, you have
It's
to be
like, wait, this wasn't
careful.
my job to begin with. I was just helping. How did
Exactly.
it become
You're
my
just
job?
helping, but it turns into, you become that point person for whatever
Yeah.
that is, because you're the one that's doing the most of the work, or,
Hmm.
and again, you start out with just assisting, and
Hmm.
then it turns into yours,
Hmm.
because uh, part of it is that if I'm involved in something, I want to make sure it's done right. I want to make sure that it's completed and on time. So a lot of times we may take the reins more than we should, and we
Hmm.
say, "Hell, my name is attached to this. I want to make sure it's going to come out right." And
Hmm.
so many people will take advantage of that. Your willingness to step up, to take the reins, to take control, then that just leaves less responsibility for them, and less
Yeah.
expectations for them, because they now
Yeah.
know someone's fully capable of doing it. It's going to take over, so
Hmm.
they can kind of, like you said, take a step back, go hang out at, drink coffee more, whatever they do now that they have that spare time. So yeah, definitely have to be careful that you maybe uh, you know getting yourself in a situation where you become the primary, when again all you wanted to do was assist at the very beginning.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
I was just thinking when you were saying that, not thinking to speak, but just listening. And it reminded me of putting your own self in jeopardy
Yep.
because, you're dialed up, they're able to dial it down. Now they're still doing their job really great. And when you back down off of doing that, oh, now you're not performing. So
Right.
that then
Right.
becomes the perception. They've dialed way down because you've taken over all this
Yeah.
stuff that's been put on your plate. Again, you said, it started as assisting. Hey, here's a little
Right.
help. I can help you with
Yep.
that. Or, hey, do you know someone that can do to help me with this? Oh, I can do that because I like to
Yep.
stay busy.
Yeah.
And now you're owning all this stuff, and everyone else is dialed down. They're still looking great, but when you dial it down, it's like, oh, you stopped working.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've
So
you've jeopardized your position.
absolutely. Yeah. Again, it's hard for us, people that want to continue to contribute, that want to continue to stay above,
Mhm,
for us to just sit back.
mhm,
It really is difficult, for me to do that. Again, you put yourself at a detriment when you do raise your hand and say, "Hey," but
mhm,
then you also feel guilty or bad when
mhm,
people start tossing out, "Hey, is there anybody in the room that can do this?" And you know
mhm.
you can do it, but if you raise your hand, it's yours.
It's yours.
But
You own
people
it.
people are looking at you, side eyed, like, "Are you going to take that? Are you going to, accept
Yeah.
that?" And you're thinking, that's again just another one of those things that'll be mine when that's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
That's
And
not
then, yeah,
in my job description. That's, it
exactly.
becomes your thing, even
Hmm.
though that's not what your job description says, or
Hmm.
your normal course of duties or work, but it quickly becomes yours
Yep.
when you raise your hand and say, "Okay, I'll do it."
Yeah. And
So
there's no end game benefit for you. It's
right,
just
yeah.
extra work that gets done,
Right,
and potentially it's going to make other people look even better because
absolutely,
they were
because it's
air quotes, part of it.
yep, and it's going to get done.
Hmm.
That yeah, and again, they walk away with the accolades or with the pat on the back, and so yeah, you become someone who just did a lot of additional work, that may not be recognized, or may not your name may not even be brought up again after
Hmm.
you do the initial. Okay, I've
Right.
got it. So it's
Yeah.
been
Someone else
challenging
gets
for
the
me.
promotion. Someone else gets the reward
Absolutely.
or accolades. Yeah. To your point, I think I just reiterated what you just said.
Yeah, but again, you're right. It puts you at a detriment sometimes because of your willingness to go above and beyond, or to step in and to
Hmm.
assist. And then, like we talked about it, people frown upon it if you don't step up, if you
Hmm.
don't say, "I'm willing to do this," even though people know you can do it. But that's what happens when you throw all of your skills, all your abilities out there on the table, and
Hmm.
then people start to say, "Hey, well, don't you do that, or can't you do that?" And then when you say, "I can," but then now they're looking at you like, "Well, they're not a team player.
Hmm.
They don't
Or
want to
you've done
assist
this
me."
before. Hey, I'm pulling you back over to do it again and again
Right.
and
Yeah.
again.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, it's a challenge, in many ways, because again, people view you as, "Well, you can do this, or you've done this. Why aren't you doing it again?" That was supposedly a one time,
Hmm.
deal, but now it's turned into a normal thing or a expected thing, and
Hmm.
that's what typically happens is getting the additional, compensation for it. The expectation is that you continue to do it,
Hmm.
and so that's when it becomes a detriment, because again, you're doing way above and beyond maybe your peers at the same level, and you're getting paid the same amount
Hmm.
of money or the same compensation, when again you're clearly doing more than required of your job or
Hmm.
your responsibilities.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of one of the other things that we were chatting about before we went online, and it was, oh yeah, you've done so great. You've done all these wonderful things, but you don't have this one tiny grain of sand,
Right.
and that's why I couldn't do it. That's why you
Right.
couldn't get
Right.
the promotion or get the recognition,
Yeah.
or there's always that one but in there,
Right.
and or that one, you know oh, if you just would have gone a little bit
Right.
harder.
Yeah.
It's like no one else is running as fast as I'm
Right.
sprinting. I'm in this, I'm sprinting this marathon.
Right.
you
Yep.
know
No, I
So
always refer to that again as moving the goalposts.
yeah.
Like you say, you achieve this, you achieve that. You have all these things that you've accomplished, or like we just talked about, things that maybe not under your job description or your responsibilities, but you've done it, performed it well. But again, it's not recognized because
Hmm.
it's not official or it's not your responsibility, even though you've been doing it for the past 2 years. And people may look at it and say, "Yeah, you've done that," but
Hmm. You should have
it's
been doing this.
exactly. So that's the other again that other concern that you go through all this effort, energy, fill in, and then come down to it, and it's not rewarded or
Right.
acknowledged to help move you to that next level. So that's that's the downside to
Hmm.
doing more or too much
Hmm.
as expected.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was told one time that um you're capable of more, that person isn't, that they went above and beyond for them,
right,
and
right,
so that's why they're getting the promotion or the recognition and you're
right.
not. It's like,
Yep.
wait, what? you know they accomplished three goals. I accomplished the same three goals, but because I did it quicker, 12 more goals were added, and
Right.
I didn't get that. I only got to 11, and that's why I didn't get
Right.
recognized.
Right. Yeah. So again, that's that moving that goalpost
Yeah.
further away because you're right.
Hmm.
You're right. You met the requirement just like your peer,
Hmm.
but because you met it faster or quicker, then you are assigned more, but then
Hmm.
you're not able to finish it. So now it's a
Now you,
detriment.
yeah, now you
It,
failed.
right. And so again, that's why it in ways it makes you want to not do those other
Hmm. It's
things
a
and to
fine line.
show
It
your
really is.
abilities just because of that. But at
Hmm.
the same time, it does eat at you when you know that you can outperform or do
Yeah.
better, and you kind of dim your turn your
Yeah.
switch down a little bit
Yeah.
so that you're not standing out. So
Hmm.
again, just a challenge.
Right. Right. Well, looks like it's about time to start winding down and wrapping up another episode. What final thoughts do you have on are you doing too much?
Well, I think I started with the question always often ask more than are you doing too much? Are you doing enough? So
Hmm.
that is a fine line and a balance between the two, because
Hmm.
as we've talked about, this past half hour, the idea that that you're going way above and beyond, and how far do you go? What's your limit? But to evaluate that, because again,
Hmm.
not everyone is going to view it as, "Wow, this person is amazing. Let's give them credit for it. Let's acknowledge them." In most cases, it's going to be, "Well, you didn't do enough. I need
Yeah.
more."
Yeah.
And so, just it's that fine line and that balance. Again, thinking to yourself, "Am I doing too much?" So, just always thinking about that equal balance.
Hmm.
I'd say that's what I would like to leave our audience with.
I think that's a great way to end the show, Joe. That's an awesome takeaway for the show. So with that, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us for another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, the personal, professional, and career development podcast. And we really appreciate all the support, all the listeners, all the subscribers. It's awesome. We love all the things that are happening with the show. So with that, we want you to keep on being your not so ordinary you.